You black can't do anything right. Billionaire humiliates waitress for spilling coffee. What if the billionaire who humiliated you for a mistake ended up being the one to give you the strength to change your life forever? Tara Collins was no stranger to the grind. At 26, she carried the weight of her dreams on her shoulders, each step a deliberate march toward a future she could almost touch. Raised by her grandmother in a modest apartment on Chicago's South Side, Tara grew up hearing stories of resilience. How her grandmother worked 3 jobs to keep the lights on, how she faced down landlords and bill collectors with a fire in her eyes. "You're stronger than you know," Nana would say, her voice warm but firm. "Don't let nobody tell you different." Tara believed her. She had to. It was that belief that kept her going through 12-hour shifts at Café Lumière, a high-end spot in downtown Chicago where the clientele dripped wealth and the tips could make or break her rent. By night, she traded her apron for textbooks, studying pre-law at the local community college. Her second job at a diner across town filled the gaps, but sleep was a luxury she couldn't afford. Every day was a balancing act. Smile through the exhaustion, ignore the microaggressions, keep her eyes on the prize. A law degree, a chance to fight for justice, to be the voice her grandmother always told her she could be. At Café Lumière, Tara was a chameleon. She knew how to charm the regulars, how to dodge the subtle jabs from patrons who assumed she was just a waitress. The manager, Greg, liked her work ethic but wasn't above reminding her to keep the customers happy, no matter what. Tara swallowed the indignity, knowing her job hung by a thread. She was black, she was young, and she was a woman in a world that rarely let her forget it. That afternoon, the café buzzed with its usual crowd, suits on lunch breaks, influencers snapping photos of their lattes, and a few tourists marveling at the chandeliered ceiling. Tara moved with practiced grace, balancing trays and flashing smiles despite the ache in her feet. At the corner booth sat a group of 4, 3 men and a woman, all dressed like they'd stepped out of a magazine. The man at the head of the table was Henry Caldwell, a name Tara didn't know but whose presence demanded attention. His tailored suit screamed money, his sharp jaw and colder eyes screamed power. She'd overheard enough to know he was someone important, someone who could tip generously, or ruin her day. Tara approached with a fresh pot of coffee, her hands steady despite the weight of the day. "Refill, sir?" she asked, her voice polite but warm. Henry barely glanced at her, nodding as he continued his conversation about market disruptions. She leaned in to pour, careful not to disturb the table's rhythm. But as she tilted the pot, her sleeve caught the edge of a water glass. It tipped, and before she could react, a stream of hot coffee splashed onto Henry's lap. The room seemed to freeze. The coffee soaked into his pristine suit, a dark stain spreading like a bruise. Henry's eyes widened, then narrowed. He shot to his feet, his chair scraping against the floor. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he roared, his voice carrying to every corner of the café. Tara's heart plummeted. She set the pot down, her hands shaking. "I'm so sorry, sir. Sorry." Henry cut her off, his face flushing red. "You black people can't do anything right. You don't even know how to serve coffee without making a mess." The words hit like a slap, sharp and public. The café fell silent, forks clinking to a stop, every eye on Tara. She felt the weight of their stares, the judgment, the pity. Her throat tightened, but she couldn't cry. Not here, not now. "I'll get it cleaned," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll pay for the dry cleaning, sir." "Dry cleaning?" Henry sneered, stepping closer, his height looming over her. "You think you can afford to fix this? You're a walking disaster. People like you shouldn't be anywhere near a place like this." He turned to the manager, who was hurrying over, his face pale. "Fire her. Now. I don't want incompetence like this serving me." Greg hesitated, his eyes darting between Tara and Henry. "Mr. Caldwell, I'm sure we can do it." Henry snapped, his voice a whip. Tara stood rooted, her mind racing. She needed this job. Rent was due, her tuition was looming, and her grandmother's medical bills weren't getting any smaller. But the humiliation burned, a fire in her chest she couldn't extinguish. She wanted to scream, to tell him he was wrong, to demand respect. But she knew the cost of speaking up. She'd seen it before: lose your temper, lose your job, lose everything. At the next table, Lila Morgan sat alone, her laptop open, a half-finished latte cooling beside her. At 32, Lila was a paradox: sharp-tongued and soft-hearted, a former attorney who'd walked away from a high-flying career after a personal tragedy she didn't talk about. Her auburn hair was pulled into a messy bun, her glasses slipping down her nose as she typed furiously, drafting a freelance article on workplace discrimination. She'd been half listening to the cafe's hum until Henry's outburst jolted her upright. Lila knew Henry Caldwell's name. Everyone in Chicago's legal circles did. A billionaire venture capitalist, he'd built his fortune on tech startups and real estate deals, but whispers followed him: shady contracts, exploited workers, a trail of lawsuits settled out of court. Lila had faced men like him before, men who wielded power like a weapon. She'd spent years in courtrooms dismantling their egos with facts and law. But this was personal. She watched Tara, saw the way her shoulders stiffened, the way her eyes flickered with pain she wouldn't let spill over. Lila's heart ached. She knew that look, knew what it felt like to be reduced to nothing in front of a crowd. When Henry's tirade escalated, Lila's patience snapped. She closed her laptop, stood, and walked to the corner booth. "Excuse me," Lila said, her voice calm but cutting, loud enough to draw every eye. Henry turned, his scowl shifting to surprise. "I couldn't help but overhear. And I have to say, your behavior is not only uncalled for but illegal." Henry blinked, caught off guard. "Who the hell are you?" "Someone who knows the law," Lila said, stepping closer. "You just publicly humiliated this woman based on her race. That's not just rude, it's discrimination. Illinois law doesn't take kindly to that, and neither do I." She gestured to the silent crowd. "You think you can scream at her, demean her, because of who she is? You're not untouchable, Mr. Caldwell. Your money doesn't buy you the right to treat people like garbage." The cafe was a vacuum, every breath held. Henry's face darkened, but there was a flicker of unease in his eyes. "Mind your own business," he growled, but his voice lacked its earlier venom. Lila didn't flinch. "It is my business when you're breaking the law in front of me. You owe her an apology. And if you don't rethink your approach, you might find yourself in more trouble than a stained suit." Tara stood frozen, her heart pounding. She didn't know this woman, didn't know why she was stepping in, but something in Lila's voice, steady, unafraid, gave her a flicker of hope. The other patrons were stirring now, some nodding, others whispering. Greg, the manager, looked like he wanted to disappear. Henry straightened, brushing off his suit as if to reclaim his authority. "You don't know who you're talking to," he said, but his voice wavered. He grabbed his coat and stormed out, his entourage scrambling to follow. The cafe exhaled, the tension breaking like a wave. Lila turned to Tara, her expression softening. She pulled a business card from her pocket and pressed it into Tara's hand. "I'm Lila Morgan. I used to be an attorney. If you need help, any kind of help, call me. You don't deserve what just happened." Tara stared at the card, her fingers trembling. "Thank you," she managed, her voice thick. She wanted to say more, to ask why Lila cared, but the words wouldn't come. Years of being told to stay quiet, to take it, to survive, held her back. Greg approached, wringing his hands. "Tara, I'm sorry, but you know how it is with customers like him. Maybe take the rest of the day off." Tara nodded, her jaw tight. She didn't trust herself to speak. She grabbed her coat and slipped out the back, the business card burning a hole in her pocket. By the time Tara got home, her phone was buzzing. A coworker had recorded the incident and posted it online, and it was spreading like wildfire. The video captured everything: Henry's rant, Lila's confrontation, Tara's quiet strength. The comments poured in, some cruel, but most outraged on her behalf. "This is disgusting," one read. "Tara deserves better." Another, "Henry Caldwell's a bully." Time to take him down. Tara sat on her couch, scrolling through the posts, her emotions a tangle of shame and defiance. She'd spent her life keeping her head down, but now the world was watching. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind. You're stronger than you know. She opened Lila's card, her thumb tracing the embossed letters. Could she trust this stranger? Could she trust herself? The next morning, Tara returned to the cafe, steeling herself for another shift. But the mood was different. Patrons approached her, offering words of support. A woman in her 50s, a regular, slipped her a $50 tip and whispered, "I've been where you are. Keep going." A young couple left a note, "You're an inspiration." Tara's chest tightened. She wasn't used to this, people seeing her, really seeing her. Greg called her into his office. "The owners saw the video," he said, his voice cautious. "They're offering you a raise. And an apology. We don't want to lose you." Tara looked at him, the man who'd stood silent while Henry tore her apart. "I appreciate that," she said, her voice steady. "But I'm done here." She handed him her apron and walked out, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and freedom. She didn't need a job that made her feel small. Not anymore. That evening, Tara called Lila. They met at a small diner, the kind where the coffee was cheap and the booths were worn. Lila listened as Tara poured out her story, her dreams, her struggles, the weight of always having to prove herself. Lila nodded, her eyes kind but fierce. "You're not alone in this," she said. "And you don't have to fight alone." Lila offered Tara an internship at a small law firm run by a friend, a chance to get her foot in the door. "It's not glamorous," Lila warned. "But it's real work. You'll learn, you'll grow, and you'll see what you're capable of." Tara hesitated. "Why are you helping me?" Lila's smile faded, her eyes distant. "Because I know what it's like to feel powerless. And I know what it's like to find your voice. You deserve that chance." Tara took the internship, diving into the world of legal briefs and case files. The work was grueling, but it lit a fire in her. She wasn't just a waitress anymore, she was a student, a fighter, a future lawyer. Lila became her mentor, guiding her through the labyrinth of law with a mix of tough love and encouragement. Together, they uncovered a pattern in Henry Caldwell's business dealings, discriminatory hiring practices, wage theft, and a string of settled lawsuits from employees who'd been silenced. Lila saw an opportunity. "This isn't just about you anymore," she told Tara. "This is about everyone he's hurt." They built a case, working late nights in Lila's cramped office. Tara's research was meticulous, her passion unyielding. She interviewed former employees, many of whom were people of color who'd faced the same venom she had. Their stories fueled her, each one a brick in the wall they were building against Henry. The lawsuit hit the courts like a thunderclap. Henry's legal team was formidable, but Lila was relentless, and Tara's testimony was a beacon. She stood in the courtroom, her voice steady, recounting the day in the cafe, the way Henry's words had cut her, the way she'd refused to break. The jury listened, rapt, as she spoke of her dreams, her grandmother's lessons, her fight for dignity. The verdict came on a crisp fall morning. Henry's company was found liable for systemic discrimination, ordered to pay millions in damages to affected employees. The news spread, headlines blaring, "Billionaire's empire crumbles in landmark discrimination case." Henry's reputation was in tatters, his influence shattered. For Tara, the victory was more than financial. It was personal. She'd found her voice, her purpose. She stood outside the courthouse, Lila at her side, reporters clamoring for a quote. "This isn't just about me," Tara said, her voice clear. "It's about every person who's been told they're not enough. We are enough. And we're not staying silent anymore." Months later, Tara sat in her community college classroom, her books spread out, a new internship offer in her inbox, this one from a prestigious firm. The cafe incident felt like a lifetime ago, but it had changed her. She wasn't just chasing a dream anymore, she was living it. Lila had moved on to a new project, fighting for workers' rights across the city. They stayed in touch, their bond forged in the fire of that day. Tara's grandmother, frail but proud, framed the newspaper clipping about the lawsuit. "You did it, baby," she said, her eyes shining. "You showed him." Tara smiled, her heart full. She'd faced the worst and come out stronger. The world was still hard, still unfair, but she knew now, she was stronger than she'd ever known. And she wasn't done fighting.